Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast, the podcast dedicated to simplifying the commercial real estate industry for the masses. Each week, we sit down with industry experts to dissect the many facets of commercial real estate and extract valuable lessons you can apply to your business. Whether you're a new or seasoned business owner or investor, the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast will be your go-to resource for all your commercial real estate needs. Now, here are your hosts, Raphael Collazo and Jeff Walston.
Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast. I'm your host, Raphael Collazo, here with my co-host, Jeff Walston. How's it going, my friend?
Going well. Just enjoying the warmer weather. And when I say warmer, it's coming up from teens to now the 30s. So I'm excited about that. So not out there below freezing. So, and then work's going great. I finished the week strong and ready for next week. And what about you, Raphael?
Yeah, no, same. I'm not loving the cold weather. It's pretty terrible, but hopefully we can make it out of January and get back into some semblance of warmer weather. And similar to you, I mean, starting the new year, got a lot of activity going, which is great. I think it's going to be a great business year for 2022 is going to be a great year for business in the United States and probably all across the world, but really excited for the future prospects. And, speaking of excitement, I mean, we had a really great conversation. I'm not making this lightly. We really did have a phenomenal conversation with Cody Payne. He's a senior VP at Colliers International in Dallas, Fort Worth. We just had a very engaging and enlightening conversation, primarily on the office sector. He's an office and industrial broker in the Dallas Fort Worth area, and he's helped a lot of people acquire and sell office properties and industrial properties in that area. And so some of the things we talked about pertaining to that were that how he got into the business. He actually didn't go to college, went straight into the commercial real estate business. So we talked about some of the challenges that he faced early on as it pertains to building his business on the brokerage end. We also talked about some of the pros and cons of office buildings, because that's one of the things out there for a lot of investors are kind of hesitant about office, but in reality, there are some unique opportunities out there that you can capitalize on that he kind of highlighted within that section. And then also we discuss various mistakes that investors make that when they're looking at office properties in particular, because there's a lot more moving parts in an office building than maybe, let's say, an industrial building where you're talking about a large warehouse that you're, operating a business out of. So, and then finally, we wrapped it up and talked a little bit about, the future of the office market and what he thinks is going to happen. And then how he was able to leverage LinkedIn to grow his personal brand, which we keep harping on to the audience, is to try to build some form of thought leadership platform and really engage with an audience on a regular basis. So it was a phenomenal podcast episode. I gained a lot from our conversation. Jeff, do you think you'd like to add anything to that?
Well, yeah, like you said, everybody is kind of hesitant on the office space, but I think Cody did a phenomenal job kind of calming those hesitations down and how he's seen and from his past experience. So I think that you guys, like Raphael said, you're going to get huge benefit for listening to this, particularly if you want to learn more about office space. So
100%. Yeah. And again, office properties, industrial properties, really, this is, whatever it is. I mean, getting educated about the investment type that you're going to make is going to serve you well, regardless of whether you go in the office building, buying office buildings. I mean, if you're investing multifamily, maybe there's some things you can learn about this podcast episode that can apply to you. If you're investing in hospitality or hotels, there's definitely something you can learn from this podcast episode. So again, and I want to quickly say, we've been getting a lot more downloads as a result of you guys leaving reviews. So if you don't mind, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, whichever podcast medium you're listening this to, because it really has been helping and we really do appreciate all the support. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into this episode. Well, hey, Cody, how's it going, man?
Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing?
Good.
Doing well. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I know for sure. Yeah, you're in Texas, so I'm sure the weather's a little bit nicer than it is here. We're in Louisville, Kentucky right now, and the weather's like 18 degrees. So not the greatest.
That's what it was. That's what it was this morning, but I'm sure it'll be 60 in a couple hours.
Yeah, I know. I lived in Phoenix. I went to school at Arizona State, and during the winter we were like 80 degrees or 75, 80 degrees. And then moving here obviously is a little bit of a change of pace, but it's been nice. Louisville's a great little town, but we really do appreciate you coming on the podcast. I mean, given your extensive experience in the commercial real estate business, I know you're going to be able to provide a ton of information. And so kind of lending into that, I wanted to learn a little bit more about you. So if you don't mind kind of telling us a little bit about yourself, and, we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So me and my guys here, we specialize in selling office and industrial buildings. That's what I've done for 16 years. And I'd say probably 90%, 95% of our stuff is Dallas, Fort Worth. And then we do a little bit, outside in other cities of Texas, and we've even done stuff in other states. But our primary focus is in DFW, on the office and industrial sector, on investments, working with investors, syndicators, institutions, from around the globe that look out here.
That's awesome. Yeah, we had a CCIM instructor was my instructor, Mark Seifert. I think he's in your guys' local market, and he's heavy in office and all across the nation too. I think they just acquired a property in Houston, Texas, that was a big office building down there, and I think they had purchased a big one in Dallas a few years ago too, that they converted into like a it was a mixed use project where they had like a restaurant on the bottom and then had offices, and then converted the some of the floors into like luxury condos. So it's really interesting, like the dynamics with, especially in Dallas, because it's such an expansive market.
Oh yeah, and there's so many people that are looking to invest out here. Years and years ago, I did a lot more work outside of DFW and other states, but as more people have looked to DFW, it's kept our time here, which I like, because I'm not a fan of traveling.
No. And I have a lot of friends out in Dallas, and they say great things about it. So you definitely, again, you're in a good area.
It was actually out in Dallas right before COVID, and talking about expanding there. It's commercial real estate's just blowing up there. So it seems, because I was there like almost 10 years prior, and it was like, I felt like it's completely changed. Like, go around and it's like, okay, this thing's expanded so much that it's an entirely new city. And at least for me, it was. So, and speaking of commercial, what actually got you interested in commercial real estate?
Well, I got into it right out of high school. I didn't want to go to college, and real estate license is universal. But the guy that I worked for, he said he would hire me if I went to college at night, and so that's what I did. But I always enjoyed sales and being creative, and every year we've been able to do more, me and the guys here, as far as whether it's getting involved on the ownership side, syndication side, build side. It's an industry that you have the ability to evolve whichever direction you want to go, instead of just staying in sales. But our primary objective is selling investments, but it's allowed us to get into other avenues and opportunities as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. And you mentioned the logic too, because that's an interesting path too, because, a lot of people in particular in our generation, like they've been told, hey, you need to go to college. Hey, you need to be able to do this. And you kind of took a divergent path. Was that kind of a difficult process for you, or you kind of always knew this is exactly what I wanted to do, and, just kind of went gung ho with it?
No, I kind of knew it was something that I wanted to do, because I knew if I did the right things, that it could, get me to the ownership side and the development side. And that was, kind of the ultimate goal. But, we love selling office buildings. We love, selling buildings multiple times over, helping people buy them, guide them to help bring the income up, generate more revenue, cash flow, ROI, whatever y'all want to call it, and then resell it. That is something that makes us really proud, especially me, when we sell somebody something and end up selling it for them again, and they do very, very well on it. That's very rewarding on our end, not just financially, but knowing that we've got the right financial guidance to assist on that side.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I think the piece where, in commercial real estate versus residential is that relationship piece. I feel like residential is very much a transaction-based business. Like, you may only do business with someone once, but, I've got clients that I've been working with since I started, which again, I was 2.5 years, 3 years, but I've done several deals with them already. And that's kind of how it is. You have the clientele that you work with for a period of time, and especially those that transact pretty regularly. I mean, you can build these long-standing relationships, and you could sell buildings 2, 3, 4 times, in particular if you've been in the business for a long period of time. So
and the average hold time, you're right. I mean, the average hold time on investments, not owner user, but office industrial investments is, around 5 years. So, and that's where a lot of the loans are as well. A lot of these are 5-year loans with a longer amortization. And so that's why the average hold time is on there. But yeah, you're right. On the residential side, it's more transactional. You're only as good as your last house or, whatnot. I've got a lot of friends in the residential side, but they're all, doing really well out here because of the expansion on that. So it's a good market for that also.
Definitely. No, so go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
I was just curious on some of these investments. Are you guys helping them do like value adds to the properties to help them with the growth over the years and then help them sell at the end? Or are you guys just like more of the transactional piece of that?
No, and that's a great question. And so we help guide on how to add value as well. And, we've actually got a leasing arm here, and me and a lot of the guys have leased and managed office and industrial buildings in the past. And so, like we sold a office building out in Carrollton, and, we said, hey, if you kind of implement these strategies, we believe you can get the rents up here, and this would ultimately be your sales price. And that was, I think, almost 4 years ago, and we just sold that deal again, and they did very, very well on it. So
Nice.
We love that kind of stuff where we can help guide, the other ones, especially if it's out of state or something in a market that we don't have. We have to do a little bit more research to be effective on that. But, the owner user side, that's more of a list and sell and go, and you may not see that property again. But on the investment side, we usually get those back around at some point.
That's great. Yeah, and you act as that advisor over a period of time, which is great. That's awesome. So one thing I wanted to ask you, because you did have, the not necessarily the traditional path, because a lot of the people that we've met that have, gotten into the commercial space, they've either been in another career and transitioned in, or they jumped in right out of college. But in your case, you kind of made the decision pretty early on. And I imagine when you first started out, there were some struggles associated with that. I mean, in your youth, you're, 18, 19 years old, you're approaching business owners that are probably in their 50s, 60s, and other investors as well. So can you kind of talk about the struggles you faced early on and how you overcame them?
Yeah, I would probably say nobody wants to deal with a 18 or 19-year-old for, doing $1 million plus transaction. Luckily for me, my hairline was already receding at that point, so I looked slightly older. But no, it was just overcoming that. And, the guy that I worked for, he even said, that's going to be your biggest struggle is getting people to trust you over somebody else that's been in the industry for a long time. And, that's why, they say in the commercial real estate side, especially if you're doing investments, it can take a little bit to start making good money. But, on the leasing side, I started off doing a lot of that. And so that's very transactional. And so that helped out as well. And so, a lot of the guys that work for me, I get them to do leasing so they can understand that aspect of it. But no, that was really about it. Just overcoming the youth and knowledge and worldly experience, which all comes in due time.
Oh, for sure. And the mental piece too, I imagine. Again, I'm still relatively new in my career as well, about 2.5 years in at this point. And the first year is just brutal. I mean, it's, again, you're just kind of building up that base. And, I'm not originally from Louisville in particular, so I didn't really have that broad network in order to tap into like the sphere of influence, as they say. So, I can definitely, empathize with probably what you went through. And again, I'm a little bit older in my career. I'm 30 right now, so I definitely wasn't 18 when I started. So it's kind of interesting to hear you say some of the struggles you faced.
Well, and it's all mental, because you got to know that, especially early on, your income and your activity and everything is going to be up and down. But as long as you know that, every day's a new day with new opportunity. And I mean, you create your own path at the end of the day. It is very difficult at times, but, other times it also things kind of are easy or they kind of come to you. And so, just understanding how to move the pieces around and be effective, and who not to deal with is just as important as who to deal with. And so, all those things you got to take into effect. But no, I made plenty of mistakes and wasted a lot of time early on with people that I probably shouldn't have, but that's how it goes.
Yeah, I like what you said about the trust thing. I feel like that's gained over time, but when you're starting out so early, it's like you're trying to get someone to trust you across the table on a large deal for them, and even you if you're starting out early. So,
well, yeah, and if you're older, I was gonna say, not to interrupt, but if you're older and you're in it, people assume that you've been doing it a long time, and you know, if you're real young, they know you haven't, and it's kind of, what have you done lately? And if you haven't done anything, you know, overcoming that mountain.
And Jeff knows. Jeff knows too, because he started in the construction business. He owns a construction company here in Louisville, and he started building houses when he was like, what, 17 or something?
16,
16. So, you know, imagine you're around people who have been in the business for 30, 40, 50 years in their 60s, and you're you know, doing all this stuff, and it's like, oh, like who's this?
Yeah, that was definitely a struggle, just building houses. Just to go off on that is, and when it was around 2008, right before 2008, 2009, the housing crisis, and that's what ultimately shut my business down was, you know, like, who are you going to do? Like a teenager here is building houses with experience, but then you have all these people that are 20, 30 years in, they lower their prices because they're getting in a crisis. And who would you go with? You know, it's one of those things that you're going to trust an experienced builder to go with that. So, and speaking of that, what are some of the pros and cons, like if you're going to invest in particularly office buildings?
Like if you're buying it as an investor?
Yeah.
So, you know, I'd say some of the pros are obviously, you know, if you do it correct, it can be very lucrative. It can be a very good investment for a long time. I mean, you know, obviously that's a pro. You know, getting into it, being able to expand into it. You know, there was a guy that I started working with in, I think, 2006, and he was buying stuff around $500,000 on the office side, and the last deal we did with him was $25 million, and that was nearly 15 years later. Yeah, that shows how far he came in that side. But I mean, some of the cons, you know, especially with COVID in the office sector, is some of the hesitancy and whatnot that people are seeing out there. Some of the tenants that are maybe not sticking around or downsizing or restructuring their businesses, and so. But when it comes to that, it's just having the right, you know, advisor, kind of like y'all said, to, you know, figure things out. Like, you know, for example, we're working on a project out here in Dallas, and they've got a very large tenant that has said, hey, we are not going to be coming back to our space. And it's a lot of square footage. And, you know, we were talking to the guys about, all right, we need to divide the space down into smaller suites and lease it out to smaller businesses. And so that's what they're doing. And they're starting to have some success on that. But there's a lot of pros and there's a lot of cons. Kind of like with anything, you know, the risk factor is probably your biggest con with any real estate investment. But you know, as long as you align yourself with the right people, right, you know, contractors, managers, you know, real estate agents, you should be just fine.
Yeah, for sure. And then we had you know, I mentioned earlier, we had Mark Seifert on the call, and he's heavy in office. And he was kind of mentioning the what he envisions the trend being long term as far as, you know, office users are concerned. I mean, he foresees like the trend of office using jobs to increase. I mean, the STEM roles, like really service-based roles, tend to be office-centric work. And when you talk about, you know, ambitious or high-performing organizations, in the career advancement piece becomes very, you know, very important, because, you know, I was in a conference in New York City a few months ago in October, actually. It's called the Commercial Real Estate Tech Conference. And a lot of the, you know, big brokerages and other REITs and stuff were there, and they talked about the impact of office going forward, and they talked heavily about the career advancement piece. Like if you're an ambitious professional and you want to showcase your leadership ability, you want to showcase what you're able to do so you can advance in your career, it's very hard to do that virtually, you know? So I feel like going forward, I think that the people's sentiment regarding offices is kind of overblown. You know, everyone's saying, oh my gosh, the office is like, or hospitality in particular. I think there's definitely been a very big swing in that direction, but I think it's eventually going to bounce back as well. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely pros and cons to every investment, but, you know, office, I think, is still a pretty solid one.
I agree. I just think you've seen a lot of restructuring in a short amount of time, and that's probably where a lot of that hesitation came from. Because, you know, as soon as COVID hit, everybody went to go work from home, and then a lot of technology kind of was born within that, and I think it just created concern and hesitancy. But you know, there's a lot of people back to office now, and I mean, yeah, there are companies that, have downsized or not come back, but there's a lot that also came out of it. And so I think it still has a very bright future, and we're not slowing down on the office sector over here at all.
For sure. And the repurpose aspect too, like there's still utility in having the office building, like with the Mark, for example, they did office building, and then they incorporated some luxury condos on the top and maybe incorporated some retail on the bottom. So like there's different ways you can play around with commercial real estate. And that's, it lends itself to what you mentioned earlier, the creativity aspect, which is kind of what attracts a lot of people to the industry. There's so many things you can do in order to make something work. So it's kind of interesting.
Oh yeah, I've even seen them converted to self-storage facilities. I mean, there's definitely use there.
Awesome. So
absolutely,
as you're going through the process, so if you're representing investors, or you may be analyzed, because again, when we work with our clients, we kind of get a feel for those who are transacting at a very high level and those who maybe need a little bit more handholding. What are some of the, I guess, the mistakes or pitfalls that you see some investors make when they're looking to invest in some of these office properties or industrial properties?
Well, I would say the category that we see the most mistakes in is in the office sector, right? Especially right now where the industrial side has been booming for years. And, if you're having trouble leasing an industrial deal, then there's only just usually a couple factors that need to be tweaked to get that figured out. On the office side, office buildings are very expensive to operate. They have some of the highest expenses as far as any other investment goes. But I'd say some of the biggest mistakes that I see on that is not understanding the tenant size, the tenant pool in the immediate area. And I recently did a segment on that because, what happens is some of these guys, like I was telling you earlier, that have a large tenant there. And, like we had one guy that lost a 75,000 square foot tenant that had a massive call center there. And that space sat vacant for, I'd probably say 4 years, because they were trying to lease it to another 75,000 square foot tenant, but that area just did not command that size of tenant. And so looking at wherever you buy an office building at, understanding the sizes of tenants that operate in that area, whether it's 3,500 square footers, 8,000 square footer, tailoring your spaces to that will usually always help you be very successful. And, especially when you're going in and buying a deal and you see, all right, some of these spaces are very unique. If they leave, it's going to cost a lot of money to refinish these out. And so just taking into account on those, because office finish out's also very expensive, not as expensive as medical generally, but understanding those aspects, I would say are the biggest key. It would be tenant size and finish out. Those are going to be your most costly items in owning office.
Awesome. Yeah. So as you're going into these opportunities, getting an understanding of what the broader market, like the available, I mean, I guess, and the absorption rate and what other, uses are in the area and what type of space they're going to require as you're looking at that. Yeah.
And it's no different. It's no different than, if someone's building an apartment complex, they kind of look at how many 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms they need. They're like, hey, we're not going to lease as many 1 bedrooms, so we'll do fewer. And just like on the self-storage side, in rural areas, they're not doing 3x5 storage units. They're doing the larger ones, 10x10, 10x15, 10x20. And then in the city, you can see the smaller ones. So it's just understanding that size base. And a lot of people don't realize that in the office sector, they just feel that it's a broad number, but it's not. Every area and every little niche market is very different.
I can imagine. And then also, I'm sure you deal with landlords too, where it's like, similar to what you're saying, that building sat vacant for 4 years. I mean, they probably didn't want to spend money into trying to, maybe demise it out or whatever else, but then they failed to understand the opportunity cost of letting that building sit vacant for 4 years. And again, I'm sure they weren't thinking it was going to sit vacant for that long, but you got to think about it and say, okay, well, if it stays vacant for a year, am I like, shooting myself in the foot? Because if the cost of operating that building for a year is essentially what it would have cost me to demise out the space to account for, new uses, maybe it was worth it for me just to kind of, pull the trigger, spend a little bit of money and be able to fill that space. So.
Absolutely. And so understanding that cost and potential cost, and all those things are why you need to align yourself with the right folks to make the right decisions.
Absolutely.
Speaking of the right decisions, I know a lot of our viewers and even myself, and I know Raphael is asking this question quite frequently, is post-pandemic, where do you see the office going? Like what direction? You think it's going to grow? You think it's going to decline? Where do you see it going?
So, I mean, it's really in sectors too, right? You've got, and we'll just kind of take the Dallas-Fort Worth area, for example, kind of like the Las Colinas submarket, especially up off 635, they house a lot of larger tenants, many national credit tenants. A lot of those guys, haven't been back to the office. Some of those spaces will need to be downsized or have already, I know several people that have given notice to downsize. And so you'll have several markets like that I believe will take a hit as those leases roll, because office leases, you got to keep in mind, especially if they're larger, they're not annual leases. Those things are 5, 7, even 10 years, and so you won't see those things hit immediately, but you will over time. And then other markets, that house some of the local regional credit guys, those are still doing very, very well, not having a lot of problems. We sold a lot of office buildings last year, and many of them were performing very, very well. And so it's going to really depend on the market and the type of tenant, because I do believe a lot of these guys have gone through a lot of restructuring. And not that they don't need office, it's just, figuring out how much they do need moving forward. And then when that lease comes up, if they need to downsize, expand, renew, move, whatever their determination is. But I think you will see some changes over the years, but because of how office leases are staggered, I don't think it's going to be, a huge punch like people thought it was going to be.
Oh, for sure. Do you lend any credence to the idea of like satellite offices becoming more popular, like the nodes of closer to the I guess where their base is? So, having like maybe smaller presences across the metro area, as opposed to having just one central location where everyone kind of goes to.
Yeah, and I think so. And I think that's why you've seen such a boom in the co-working space, because that gives the best and most flexible ability for satellite offices. And, the co-working space out here is, everywhere. I mean, you can throw a rock and hit a co-working space in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so, and most of them are doing very, very well. A lot of guys are expanding, and, they house a lot of satellite guys, is what you're referring to.
That's awesome. Interesting. So one thing I wanted to touch on, and we're really big into, kind of advocating for people to building their personal brand, because I feel like in particular on the brokerage end, investment end, really in the commercial real estate space, if you can differentiate yourself amongst the competition, you can really just amplify your returns, whether that's on the brokerage end or investment end over time. And so I'm kind of curious, because, obviously you have a very strong presence on LinkedIn, and, you've really been pushing that, it seems like. And can you kind of tell us a little bit about how you've leveraged LinkedIn and other social platforms in order to kind of grow your brand over time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that we do is, and that I do at night, is a lot of research on what we do, right? And so on the office industrial market, and look up, good, unique news articles, or, look up presentation items on, certain markets, or how to be successful on, certain office or industrial things. And we just consistently put that out there. And, just by doing the research, that helps our knowledge base as well. And so we're always doing things of that nature. I like LinkedIn. A lot of the guys here are on it. A lot of people in our industry are on it. It's a good news source for me, because I'm not big on, reading a lot of the corporate news out there, but, we do a lot on there. It's been huge. I was on LinkedIn before it was popular, back in 2005.
OG, you're OG.
Yeah. And so it's evolved a lot, and social media has been huge, but there's still a lot of people that don't use it, that we got to take old school routes for. And, I don't mind that, but we've got a lot of business off of a lot of it. And I'm a big car guy too. And so I use Instagram for that. And it's funny how many people I run across on that also, just by showing off one of the cars.
That's awesome. Yeah. We had this gentleman, Dan Lukowitz, who's an investor in he's a broker and investor in Michigan. and he's big into, gosh, I don't remember exactly the car,
Corvettes.
but Corvette. Was it Corvettes? Vipers. It was Vipers. It was
Vipers,
Dodge
Dodge Vipers.
Yeah, so he's big into Dodge Vipers, and he was saying how like he posts pictures of his Dodge Viper on LinkedIn, and he actually connected with people through that, and people were like, "Hey, like next time you're in town, let's drive around, you know." And so let's go to the track. So it's kind of interesting.
Oh
how that
yeah,
works.
I ran into a guy at the rodeo the other night out here, and he was like, "Oh, this is Cody. He's got the coolest car. What'd you drive today?" And I was like, "A Toyota." And he's like, "Oh."
Hey, it was a RAV4. So
Yeah.
I think he assumed I drove a hot rod around every day.
Yeah.
it's not practical. You seem like a practical individual, so it's like getting from point A to point B. It's probably more comfortable in a Toyota than like
than a 10 mile a gallon Mustang or something. Yeah.
So starting to round off the end of our podcast, it's one of the questions that we typically ask all of our guests is, what is the most impactful book that you ever read? And it doesn't have to be into your niche. If there's something that's maybe started your trajectory on your career, but you read something and now it's taken you in an opposite direction, or is there anything that stands out for you?
You know, my original broker that I worked for when I first got started, he gave me that book. Actually, well, there's two of them, but anyway, he gave me the book, The Secret. And, you know, that's more of a mindset kind of book. You know, a guy that before that, when I was a teenager at 16, a guy gave me the Rich Dad, Poor Dad tape as well that I listened to in the car. But, you know, The Secret's good. And whether you believe in a lot of that stuff or not, it's more of just positive thinking will, I believe, always prevail. And so that was something that I read a lot, and it helped me think back on it. But that was a good one. You know, I listened to the Grant Cardone stuff many years ago as well. You know, the 10xing your business, and a lot of that is you kind of take it for what it's worth. But it's really just about, you know, pushing yourself and doing the things that you don't want to do to help you grow.
Yeah, no, and it's thinking bigger too. You know, it's all mindset. I feel like anything that you take on in business or in life is really about how do you approach it on a day-to-day basis, and what's your mindset when you take on these tasks? Because, you know, there's a lot of tasks that throughout the day we don't want to do. I mean, it's inevitable. And Jeff was mentioning he wrote the book Eat That Frog. He read the book Eat That Frog. Yeah, by Brian Tracy, and that's what he talks about. It's like, dude, just get it out of the way in the morning. That's why I work out in the morning. Like I don't want to wake up at 4:50 or 5 in the morning to go work out, but it's like, I know I need to do it. So I just get it out of the way. And then it's like, okay, now the rest of the day I can do other things. And obviously there's other things throughout the day that I don't want to do that I try to front load in the morning for that exact reason. So, but it's,
I did the same. I front load it so I can get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Man. Yeah, and those are two great books too. The Secret, as well as you know, Rich Dad Poor Dad. That's one of the books I would say is probably one of the more popular books that people kind of reference on the podcast, just because it kind of opens your mind to the possibility of cash flow investments or cash flowing investments, I should say.
Yeah.
So
that's been around forever. But yeah, no, that was a good one. So
yeah.
Awesome. So first off, we just really want to thank you for your time, taking your time with us today. I mean, I know our audience got a ton of value from our conversation. One of the things we do at the end of the podcast is we ask our guests to contribute something to what we call this commercial real estate treasure chest. It's a repository of resources that we make available to our audience to be able to, you know, it has like helpful PDFs. We've had people contribute Excel sheets and, you know, all these other things. And I was wanting to give you the opportunity. What are you willing to contribute today?
So I'm going to send over a PDF that just.
Oh, nope. You're still muted. Sorry. There you go.
Are you there? Oh.
Yep.
I'm going to send over a PDF that's going to talk about investing in office and industrial and what to look out for.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that. Go ahead, Jeff. What were you saying?
I was going to say that's going to add a ton of value to the listeners and people that view this on YouTube for sure, because that's just. I know a lot of people want to get into that, but they just don't know where to go. Like you said, what the trajectory of office space is. So, yeah, we appreciate it for sure.
The key components on what to look out for when investing in office and industrial.
Perfect.
No, for sure. And I think that people, like you said, will gain a lot of value from it, because I think there's a lot of information out there for like multifamily investing. I feel like that's kind of the hot topic right now, but there's really not a lot for office and even industrial. One of our good buddies, Chad Griffiths, he's a broker in Canada, and he's doing a lot of industrial, content, because he's an industrial broker out there, and he's a great resource for that. And ultimately you guys are too. So we're looking forward to seeing that content. If you guys are going to want to download that, feel free to access the Commercial Real Estate Treasure Chest, and we'll be able to get you in there. So.
And you'd be surprised. I was going to say, funny you say that, you'd be surprised how many multifamily investors have bought office buildings off of us over the past few years, just really to diversify.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they've always got, a bazillion questions, and we like that. But yeah, no, we've done a lot of cross asset buyer sales over the past few years.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Cody, that's awesome. We really do appreciate all your time coming on the podcast here. I know that, like Raphael said, I know all of our viewers have gained a ton of knowledge from you, and they're going to learn more. Especially, how can they contact you if they're out in your area wanting to invest in Texas, or if they're just wanting to speak to you? How would you like for them to contact you?
We're the easiest to get a hold of. TexasOfficeInvestments.com. We'll take you to me or any of my guys, and just reach out to us on there. Cody at TXOfficeIndustrial.com. We'll get you there. We're very easily accessible.
Awesome. Yeah. Great URL too. You guys latched onto that one. That's awesome. That's a good URL to have.
Yeah.
That's
I was
awesome.
offered $65 for that URL long time ago.
You're offered what? I'm sorry.
I think when I got it, probably like 12, 13, 14 years ago, somebody offered me like $60 or something. And then we were actually offered a good amount for it not long ago, but it's funny how those have gone up in value. It's funny you say that.
What's crazy is I get people reaching out to me. Well, not necessarily, but there's brokers out there that'll buy these URLs and just sit on them. And then it's like, if someone really wants them, they'll pay an absurd value for them. And I mean, there's obviously a reason they're willing to pay as much as they are, but it's just great that you're able to snag that one. That seems like a really good URL. So
it was before office and industrial was popular, I guess.
Yeah.
Dude, you're the OG, dude. The OG. That's what it is. Well, Cody, again, we really appreciate your time. I highly encourage our audience to definitely reach out to Cody if you get a chance. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel. It helps with the YouTube algorithm, ensures more and more people can hear this message. If you guys are watching this in a or listening to this in a podcast format, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. We've seen a significant uptick in our downloads over the last several weeks as a result of you guys leaving reviews and engaging with the content. So please continue to do that. And again, thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.